Do you believe by heart that Ukraine will be a EU member soon?
I cannot say when. What is clear is that Ukraine will join. There will be new institutions, new European Parliament, new European Commission next year, and I'm totally sure, I can guarantee 100% that the commitment made by the EU will remain. I don't want to focus on NATO, but security guarantees, stability guarantees will be needed.
Clément Beaune is a French Minister of Transport, but last year, when Ukraine has got a candidate status, he has been a minister responsible for Europe, so he has been advocating Ukraine's membership in the EU. So let's talk to him. Let's ask, what does he think now about Ukrainian EU membership and Ukrainian NATO future? You have started your visit to Ukraine from Odessa, and as far as I know, you have family connections there. Are you the only French minister with roots coming from Ukraine?
I think so. I've not asked all the members of the cabinet, I must say, but I think so. And indeed, my great-grandparents were living in Odessa, and they left Odessa around 1910, and they went by boat to Turkey and then to Marseille in south of France, where they settled in 1911 probably.
Let me ask you about a sphere which is related to historic decision to grant Ukraine candidate status. And I remember well that at that time you were advocating that decision. Now, looking from the perspective, do you see that this was a correct decision from the EU?
Yes, I do think it was an important and correct decision to to grant the status of candidates to Ukraine. It was during the French presidency of the EU nearly a year ago, and we should be very proud of achieving this decision, a unanimous decision. It was, I think, a geopolitical decision, because we need to say that Ukraine will belong to the EU. And it's also, I think, a moral decision. A lot of Ukrainian members of parliament, members of government were insisting on the fact that having the hope and the concrete perspective to join the EU as soon as it's possible is a clear signal and a very, very important decision which goes beyond the symbols in the Ukrainian debates and action.
And the last phrase is very important about symbols. Do you really perceive it as a message, a symbolic message, or you believe by heart that Ukraine will be a EU member soon?
I cannot say when. I'm not, as you say, directly in charge of this dossier any longer. I think it's impossible for anyone on the Ukrainian side, on the EU side, at this very moment to say a date and say when it happens. We know that negotiating, integrating a lot of reforms, EU rules, EU standards takes some time. Of course, it also depends on the efforts made by the country which is candidating. Of course, it is a specific situation and a very dramatic situation, because for the first time, a candidate country is undergoing a war on its own territory when it is applying. So it's very difficult to say. I know there is this emphasis from Ukraine. I met Olga Stefanishyna, the vice prime minister in charge, on Saturday, and she said that there is this hope that the end of 2023 would be a window to open these negotiations. But as you do know, it has to be taken as a decision on the EU side, again by unanimity, so there will be probably a discussion. I know that Ukraine has made already a lot of steps undergoing reforms, even during a war context, and that there is a very, very, very strong motivation, to say the least, on the Ukrainian side, the Ukrainian government, to go as fast as is possible.
Regarding the timeline, I will remind you two quotes that you made. One was made in March, and you say that Ukraine probably will become the EU member in a few years, I quote that. Later in May, in the interview to Radio J, you said that it's probably 15 to 20 years to become the EU member. Where are you now? On the first position, is a quicker accession, or on the second position, on a longer way?
Be very frank, I think I said in substance the same thing, which is twofold. First, it usually takes some years. I cannot say how many. And when I said in May, and I had debates, including with Ms. Stefanishvili at that time, 15 to 20 years, it was to say, let's not imagine that it can be done overnight. And it was also months before the decision to grant candidacy was taken. It was also a way to say to, including our EU partners as presidency of the EU at the time, there will be next steps. It's not all of a sudden. It's not that when you grant candidate status, the day after or the week after or the month after, a country, Ukraine or another one, is joining the family. We know that when anyone is joining, it has a lot of political consequences in the broader sense. You have to do a new budget, new policies, new decision-making process. And when you join, we hope you join forever, for decades and decades. And we have on the EU side to be ready, and the country which joins has also to be fully ready. And what I'm sure about is that the commitment by the EU to have Ukraine joining the family as soon as we can, in a war context, then in a reconstruction context, is a very solid one. There will be new institutions, new European Parliament, new European Commission next year, and I'm totally sure, I can guarantee 100% that the commitment made by the EU will remain. And then the speed depends on efforts and circumstances.
So 15 years is not a minimal, let's say, range. If we do our job quicker, we can think of quicker accession.
To be very clear, there's no minimum. We know it takes time. Second, we know it depends on the efforts made and the circumstances and the context. Okay. And three, what is clear is that Ukraine will join.
Okay, let's switch to your portfolio, which is about reconstruction and which is connected to the war. All destructions caused by the war in Ukraine are totally unacceptable and everything have to be restored. But at the same time, it is considered often that there are several, let's say, baskets. One is fast recovery, which have to be done right now, as soon as possible. And a big part of reconstruction is postponed to, let's say, full recovery, which only will start after the war ends.
I don't think we can totally separate the emergency support and the short run and the reconstruction plan and the medium to long run. What I was very impressed about here again is that Ukrainian authorities, my colleague Mr. Kubrakov, your Vice Prime Minister for Economy, your Prime Minister, whom I met Saturday afternoon, were very focused on reconstruction already, with a clear message, I put it in my words, which was to say, we need to win the war, but we already have to prepare whenever it comes, the moments and the day after. Why? First, because it gives, and you know far better than me, hope, mobilization to the whole population, to the whole country, because you fight for something, you fight for the day after, you fight for the future, you fight for your children. And also because it needs a lot of technical, economic, political preparation. My own message during the visits was, of course, to put emergency support first. Say, we are ready to, on the civilian dimension, do more. And going back to France this week, I will convene and gather again our main private companies in the transport and logistics area to ask them, in respect with what I heard in Kiev, in the meetings, to do more and to bring more, to offer more support in these areas. But I think we are at a moment when we should do both emergency action and the master plan for the day after, on which we should already work with our companies and with our public agencies. And we are France is the first G7 country which has appointed at the president's level a special envoy of President Macron, Mr. President, who was with me in the delegation, to prepare and to coordinate our efforts in our all departments, all areas in France, but also with our European partners, multilateral partners internationally.
How much does it cost? Do you have some assessment?
To be very frank, I think no one knows, unfortunately, because the war is still ongoing. So it's very difficult to know the impacts, the consequences for the day when reconstruction will start. We have provisional assessment and proxy of assessment at the moment, done especially by the World Bank. So I have no better measure at the moment, which says around $400 billion. the only message it says, it's not a scientific figure, the only thing it says to us and to Ukraine, to its partners, is that it will be a lot. First thing, maybe it will be more, but it will be a lot. And second thing, it was very clear, so a lot of awareness on the Ukrainian side on this. It will need, of course, public support, but it's such a big amount that it will be matched only with private investment and business support too, which means that we need already to mobilize our private companies for the day after, French companies in particular in my area. And we need to have a ready-made plan for this moment, because Ukraine will need a lot of public support, but also private capital to flow in the country so that the reconstruction can be as quick as possible. Final element, we know that transport and logistics will be a big part, and probably the biggest area of these needs for the reconstruction phase. It was assessed here again by the World Bank that around a quarter of these all needs will be in the transport and logistics area.
And one more element which is badly needed is about security guarantees. And to be frank, I see no chance for reconstruction to happen if Ukraine is not a NATO member and under an umbrella of joint defense. Would you agree?
I heard that very explicitly in the discussions with Ukrainian authorities, that I don't want to focus on NATO. I know it's part of the debate, obviously, but security guarantees, stability guarantees will be needed to give the right framework for investment in the country. I think, of course, it's not only about security, that EU is also providing a very strong framework in this respect.
Membership, you mean?
It's not a military and defense alliance. EU is not about this. EU defense still is growing in light of the war and the new security context, obviously. But I think this also will be a guarantee of stability, this concrete EU perspective and EU plan. On NATO, as you do know, it's a sensitive issue that will be discussed. But I think the idea that solid security guarantees would be needed is very clear, and it was one of the obvious clear messages I conveyed with me, I brought back with me to my colleagues here coming back from Kyiv.
Thank you very much for your support, and thank you for visiting Ukraine. I very much hope to see you soon here, and for sure, Ukraine will be an EU member and NATO member sooner than later.
Thank you very much for taking some time. Thank you for organizing it by video conference.
Thank you for talking to us, and I please you to support our media via Patreon, and you will find a link in description of this video. Thank you for watching.